everyone. This is Hayden Lee here, Master Certified Executive Life and Leadership Coach. So I've been doing this awesome Enneagram series, and we've been meeting awesome Enneagram types. And I want to remind everyone that the Enneagram is about motivation, not behavior. And the Enneagram is an amazing system of self-development and self-awareness. And I like to call it a system of self-liberation, because the Enneagram, it's not an attempt to put us in a box. It actually sheds light on how we've put ourselves in a box. So when you're able to be more aware of your own Enneagram type, you can use it as a map in order to grow into the best of your type. So the more aware you are of yourself, then you can actually use the Enneagram to lean on the other types and to really be your whole best self. Because in reality, we have all 9 types in us. And the more you know your core type, the more you can use the other types to grow into the best, most authentic leader and person that you can be. So with that said, today we are meeting our amazing Type 6 panelists. And as a reminder, the motivation for Type 6 is, the need to be safe and to belong. And I can't wait to hear from our 6 panelists today to see what that means to them. So welcome, Enneagram 6 friends. If you could briefly just introduce your name, where you are, and a sentence or two about what you do. So who would like to start?
I'll go first.
Okay.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Daniel. I'm in Connecticut. Currently, I'm active duty law enforcement, and I'm building my coaching practice, working with leaders and creatives, building impossible dreams.
Nice. Thank you, Daniel.
I can go next. I'm Erin, and I am here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, home of the Michigan Wolverines. Go Blue. And I am a social psychologist and a coach, and I work with leaders, entrepreneurs, and creatives who have a big mission that they want to achieve, and I help them launch that next act in the world so that they can make an impact.
Nice. Thank you, Erin.
Nice. Well, I just want to say, I'm not sure if you caught my first part. Thank you to both of you for your service, your public service, particularly law enforcement, also very admirable. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Steve Farzian. Thank you, Hayden, for giving us this opportunity to collaborate. I am in the hotel management world. I'm very grateful to currently have a job considering the current state of affairs, and manage a great crew. I really call them teammates. I'm not really a manager. I just happen to have a title, but at the end of the day, didn't want to do all the hard work.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Steve. I'm particularly excited about our panel today because we actually have a representative of all 3 subtypes of the 6 on the panel. So as a reminder to our viewers, so even though there's 9 core types of the Enneagram, there's 3 subtypes within each core type. So 9 times 3 is 27. So there's actually 27 types of the Enneagram. So there is the 3 subtypes. There is a one-to-one type, there is a self-preservation type, and there is a social type. So we have all 3 of those of subtypes of 6s here, and it's quite interesting. So Steve is a social 6, and Daniel is a one-to-one 6, and Erin is a self-preservation 6. And what does that even mean? So self-preservation, that subtype or that instinct, so self-preservation is an instinct, and the instinct paired with your core type is your subtype. Right, so all of the 9 Enneagram types have those 3 subtypes in them, or those 3 instincts in them, which makes a subtype. So I can't wait to go into that a little bit further, but it's already occurring to me that it's so interesting as you talk that I'm kind of seeing the subtypes come out. But we will get into exactly what those subtypes mean a little bit later. But first, I want to hear from our awesome panelists. When you first got your Enneagram report and were reading it, tell me about your first reactions. What was that like? Steve, do you want to start? I see you're laughing.
I'll take the first crack at it. I wasn't entirely surprised. Initially, I was like, oh my God. I think I joked even with my spouse and said, it's weird. This is almost like mind reading. Like it feels like they had drilled down and they know more about me than I know. You know, how did they figure this out from taking a silly test? But it was like dead spot on. But I was also just really surprised at that fact. But it just really helped me put things in perspective. It made it real for me, with just kind of my overlook, my management style, just my interaction with people, my overlook and outlook on most things. So it was really interesting for me.
Nice. Who's next?
I can go. So I got typed about a year ago, and I had already taken an Enneagram test in the past, and I had been typed as a 6. And my report came back as a 2. And I looked at the report and I read it, and I was open thinking, well, okay, I know that underneath a 2, there's a lot of need to be liked, which similar to belonging. I read through the 2 report and I went, no, this doesn't land. And I was trying to decide if no, this doesn't land because I'm agitated and don't want to be this, or if it really doesn't land, and it just wasn't landing. And so Hayden was gracious enough to get me a retest. And when I subtyped or typed as a 6 with the self-preservation instinct, I read the report and I went, oh yeah, this is me. Like, it was 23, 27 pages, however long, of just like my life right there. And I went, wow, I'm so glad that I kind of fought back and fought for my 6-ness, because now it's like, all right, yep, this is me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When I first got my results, it was I was a bit surprised, because similar to Aaron, I had taken the Enneagram previously, and I think probably within the last 3 months, or within 3 months before I got these results, I typed as a 4 twice, but those were, online free test. And yeah, so reading through the 6 results, at first I was kind of like, well, it sort of hits, but then it didn't feel like it did. But the more I sat with it, the more we kind of conversed about it, the more it kind of made sense, and I was enlightened, so to say. Yeah. And now, as I read through my results, I can see me all throughout.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel, for saying that. Daniel is the 1-to-1 6, which is the counter type. So the counter type, which all 9 types have a counter type, and that's the one type that acts the least like the other types. So that may be part of the reason why it didn't resonate right off the bat, Daniel, because as a counter type is a counterphobic 6, which we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So I'm interested to hear from all of you, though, the motivation, though, of belonging and the motivation of being safe. How does that land with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think there's like different levels of safety, and some of the Enneagram questions, when I went back through it the second time, I kind of recognized my safety is not a physical safety. It is psychological, and it's like financial and emotional safety. And that has played a huge, huge role in my life, like over preparing for disaster financially, even though things are great. Really searching for the people in my life that I can be safe with. And, the 6 is called the Loyal Skeptic. And I've been told my whole life that I am the most loyal person that people have ever met. But it always comes from like a deep, like, I got to really trust you. And I really want to belong and be, in relationship with people. But it comes from this, I got to be safe first.
Yeah. And I will just go into a little bit now. That is the self-preservation instinct, right? So the self-preservation instinct, which exists in all the Enneagram types, but for the self-preservation 6, the self-preservation instinct means, like, first and foremost, looking out for your own needs. So what Aaron is describing is, spot on. Like, the motivation to be to belong and to be safe, but definitely looking out. All right, do I have enough money? Do I have enough, psychological safety and security? So, which is that instinct, right? Which is which is different than the 1-to-1 instinct, which is Daniel is, really having intense relationships with certain people, keeping certain people safe. And then the 1-to-1 instinct can come off as intimidating sometimes, whereas they go against fear and in a way that may be showing strength or intimidation. How does that land with you, Daniel?
It's head on. just over as I've grown in life, I've taken more and more risk and done things that more and more people would say is not safe. Even just working in law enforcement, I remember the very first time I was working and heard gunshots, and not even really thinking twice, but driving toward the direction where they came from. And as I thought about it later that night, it's like, that's something not a whole lot of people would think about doing. But for me in that moment, it's like, okay, there's somebody in need somewhere. So it was no thought for me. Just let's go, keep them safe or get them safe.
Yeah. So I love that. There's the safety issue, but it's keeping certain people safe. And then the one-to-one's sickness is your sense of security comes from running towards fear, literally running towards gunshots in a fierce way. So I want to make a distinction that, Aaron and I had this conversation before where Aaron had thought maybe, you were a counterphobic 6, right? So I think there is instances of your life where maybe you feel fear and you do it anyways, but it's with a different, I think a different type of fierceness and that Daniel may have, that true, I'm going to run towards fire. I'm going to literal fire. I'm going to run towards literal gunshots. Because what upon reflection for Aaron as a 6, I think you sometimes when you do things when you're scared, it is more of a self-preservation, right? It's like, that's my way to belong. That's my way to protect myself is to, yeah. So does that make sense?
And it's also I think I said this to you, Hayden, this running towards fear is a new thing in the last several years because I got sick of being scared of everything.
Oh yeah.
And so if you think about instinct as a word, my instinct has never been to run towards fear. It's been completely different. It's the point where I was like, I don't like this about myself. I need to do something different. And so I just made a mindset shift and was like, oh, if I'm scared, I got to go do it.
Yeah. I love that distinction that, remember, Enneagram is about motivation and instinct, not behavior, right? Because behavior is once I think all of us on this call are, self-aware people. So obviously there's things we're working on in ourselves, but it's different than our instinct and our innate motivation. So what about you, Steve? Tell us about belonging and safety for you, and how might the social aspect come into that, where social type is the one who thinks about the group, thinks about how I can make everyone belong in the group, and where loyalty is important to a group or a community. How does that apply to you in terms of safety and belonging?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of pros and cons to it. I mean, I like it. It works for me because it helps me bring, my team and my group together. And I like to, despite rank, make everybody feel like they belong. Doesn't matter, what their background is, where they come from, what color their shoes are, their hair. That for me, it's just all that's blind. What's important is that we're all on the same page, that we're all treated equally and with dignity and respect. But also the safety is important to me. But it also, the counter, if you would like to call it a negative, is I can sometimes be hesitant to proceed into something that probably most normal people would walk right into. I usually proceed with caution. I'm a skeptic, and really like to think things out. And some people might just say hey, we're going to be, handing out masks. And I'm like, wait, have you thought about the liability involved? Are you sure? Are those masks really? Are they approved? And so it can sometimes hinder things too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Steve. I think with the 6 being the loyal skeptic, who can be very discerning, right? And, being cautious, which can be a great strength. But what the Enneagram teaches us is that any strength in excess becomes a weakness, right? So Steve has started talking about that as an example. What about everyone else? How does this thinking about possible worst case scenarios and being overly discerning, how does that get in your way, Daniel and Aaron?
Well, for me, it's, I guess it's shown up in the risk that I'm willing to take. Throwing, caution to the wind. And when I do face those moments where fear may arise, still run headlong into it. And it will, I suffer there because sometimes I'll bite off more than I can chew in particular situations. And then I'll have to like kind of fall back and regroup and then reassess the situation. And it's, yeah, just acknowledging, you know, where I misjudged the situation.
Hmm. That's so interesting. Yeah, as the counter six, it's like my way to feel safe is I'm going to do things that are unsafe. But then when you take big actions, sometimes it might be counterproductive. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Aaron?
So for me, the skepticism really creates confusion in my life of what do I actually believe? What do I stand for? A lot of skepticism makes me, not want to latch on to any one thing. And like I can see it back in my life, even when I was a PhD student, not believing all the science and then not knowing what science to believe. And I still don't know what science to believe to use in my practice. And so it just leaves me in this like limbo state. And it leaves me in this like fear of like, once I start believing something, am I going to get taken advantage of? I even had this conversation with my coach recently, which in retrospect feels kind of a little insane, but I was like, I'm afraid if I start like really listening to you and following the things you say, they're so out of my comfort zone that I'm going to like, that you're going to like make me into a cult person. And she's what? But it's just, it creates this, yeah, don't believe anything, because if you believe, you'll be wrong or you'll be taken advantage of, and that's the end of the world.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that you're describing a struggle that is very real for sixes, which is wanting to belong, but at the same time struggling to trust others. So tell us about that, folks, how there's this wanting to belong, wanting to be a part of the group, but then also making it hard, struggling to trust others. And sometimes a blind spot for sixes is trust and loyalty is so important to all of you. But because it's so important to all of you, you may behave in ways which makes it harder to trust you, right? So how does that land with all of you, this idea of wanting to belong, but then having issues with trust, valuing trust and loyalty, but then sometimes behaving in ways where others may not be able to trust you as much because of your fear of mistrust. Does that make sense? It's kind of like this catch-22 we've got ourselves in. So I see Steve, you're nodding your head. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I just remember being in a team meeting, ironically with you, Hayden, and it was nice. I'll share my own experience. It was so nice for me to see that how loyalty is very important to me, and how I call it fear is kind of at the forefront. How that in itself can be destructive to creating bonds and relationships with others, particularly with coworkers. Putting my personal life to the side for a moment, but what was particularly interesting is I started to develop this mindset of, well, after you have a meeting with someone, and you put an action plan together, or an action item, follow it up with an email, to document, what the discussion was. And before I know it, was, a part of me being skeptic and fear driven. I think, well, if it doesn't get documented, it's not going to happen. And it didn't happen. And, how do you hold someone accountable for that? And before you know it, I have, 3/4 of the organization, everybody emailing each other and carbon copying or deadlines. And my fear had now caused a ripple effect with my teammates, where they started acting in ways that just, appears to be unreasonable. So it really brought a lot of awareness for me.
Yeah. Well, what you're describing as the social six, also social sixes, really love rules, policies, and procedures. So what I'm describing is like Steve, like really, really being a stickler for these rules, policies, and procedures from a place of wanting to be safe, to make sure everyone's got their T's crossed, their I's dotted. So it's coming from a place of security. Want to make sure everything looks good. But how it can be perceived, as Steve is saying, is creating a culture of like, do people not trust me? Is this what's happening? So I think that's a very, very interesting take, and definitely the social six in you. It's like wanting to have everything, those rules and policies in place. But in excess, of course, could come off as mistrusting. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How about you two? What's coming up for you in terms of this struggle of wanting to belong, but having issues with trust? And also, because you value trust so much, it may make it harder for others to trust you. How might that land, if at all?
And actually, as you say that, I think I've over rotated towards being an extremely trustworthy person because I'm so mistrusting. And what actually lands for me is something I've been really learning about myself lately, which is when I perceive that someone doesn't trust me, and it's not that they don't trust me with them, it's like they don't trust my competence, or they don't trust that I know what I'm doing, I get really freaking defensive because I spend so much of my time being a very trustworthy person and getting a lot of feedback, actually, that I'm one of the few people that people can just be completely themselves. So it's really interesting. I think I probably, going back earlier in life, may have been different, but like I think in the last several years, I've really over rotated towards running towards fear and not having these trust issues. And it's created a lot more bonds in my life that are really healthy.
Nice. Nice. What about you, Dan?
Picture I have in my mind is like when I meet somebody new, or new relationships are formed. It's almost as if I open up the door for them, but I don't open the door and then step out the way and just kind of let them in. But I stand at the door and keep one hand on it, kind of welcome them in with the other hand. But I'm watching them to kind of see if they're being open as well as they're coming in. It's like, yeah, I'm being open and vulnerable. Like, are you being the same? And so there's this tension sort of between my desire, again, for that deep relationship and like that loyalty, and at the same time there's the suspicion of, what are their real motives and intentions, and are they being completely authentic with me? And then I have to ask myself, am I being completely authentic in the situation? So it's yeah, I'm just kind of I watch people a lot in that regard.
I love that metaphor, that example of like letting them in, but also having, one eye on them. And what's interesting though, it's a projection that's coming up for me, that word projection, because here's the thing, with on the receiving end of being watched by Daniel, I feel being watched, right? So that's where it kind of happens. What I'm talking about sometimes is like, you want to trust me, but you also want to be careful, and you want to make sure. But then on the receiving end of those who are being watched, it's like, oh, what is happening here? Like, and then I get, then that's what leads to me maybe mistrusting you, right? Because I'm like, well, why is he watching me? Do I need to be careful of him? Should I be watching him too? So that's where projection comes in, which can be a blind spot of the six, is sometimes this projecting your own fears or your own insecurities on others, which then becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Of them ending up not trusting you. So how might projection, how does that happen for all of you, kind of projecting maybe your own fears and insecurities on others when those fears and insecurities may not be there in the others? Yeah.
I'm very careful of it in my coaching practice. And actually I'm noticing more and more, I haven't done a typing with all of my clients, but I'm noticing that I tend to draw these people who have six-ish tendencies. But I'm very careful to really try to understand what their real fears are, and really not project, oh, this person's going to have money fears like I do, or they're going to have safety fears like I do, or that they're not going to trust me. Like I try to really, really shoot down whatever my experience is at the door, because I'm so aware of my unique lens on the world from that.
How about you, Steve? Any projection going on or anything you can think of that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I can definitely appreciate what Aaron just said. Yeah, that there's projection that occurs, and I noticed what's been helpful for me recently is to really soften and be aware of my lens, and particularly to make myself more vulnerable and explain why I have this fear. And people have an aha moment and they go, oh, that's why you want that policy. It's not to whatever, get people in trouble. It's because you saw somebody get really badly injured once with a slip and fall, and you don't want to see somebody else get injured. Okay, then it makes sense. So, a big part of it falls on me communicating and explaining, what drives me, and it makes things a lot better with not just relying on or putting up that projection without the follow-up.
That's actually a great strategy, actually for having the courage to be vulnerable and to share how your honest feelings and to explain why you're doing it. Because sometimes sixes, who their mind tends to go to worst case scenario or what could go wrong, it could be perceived as, oh, Steve's just being negative again, or Steve's just being paranoid again, right? And I think for sixes, sometimes they get a bad rap that people can see sixes as like a Debbie Downer. But then if you are actually explaining, well, this is where I'm coming from, this is why I'm doing this, or this is why I feel this way, it creates a lot more empathy, so people, really understand that. I think that's a really good strategy, actually, because sixes at their best have that courage to really be vulnerable, to explain how they really feel, to explain why they feel this way. That definitely helps with communication. Yeah. Any thoughts about that, Daniel or Aaron? We're good. So I wanted to move on. So there's something in the Enneagram called from vice to virtue. Right, so the vice, it's a fixation, and a fixation means kind of a default negative thought, action, or feeling that we may have that prevents us from actually becoming our best self and moving forward. And the virtue is something to tap into that will set you free, that will liberate you into, like a higher self and a more authentic, freer self. So unsurprisingly, the vice of the six is doubt. Right? It's like holding on to doubt, self-doubt, doubting others or doubting a situation. And then the virtue is faith, right? It's tapping into faith which is what will set you free. So how does that land for all of you is to, when you find yourself in doubt, what does that look like? And what would tapping into faith look like?
This is something I've been doing a lot of work on. I noticed how much doubt was just eating at me, even just building my business. So I have spent since February, even during coronavirus times, in faith mode. I let go of all goals. I let go of all expectations, and said, I have faith that I can do this and that things will come to me. And it has been the most incredible, however many months, what is it, 5-6 months of my world, of my life. And I'm just recommitting every day to being in that space of faith. Doubts obviously still come up, but I'm starting to notice the doubts and sort of see them from this, like, they're here, they're not me, and move through them. But it's interesting noticing just how much that held me back I'm 36 and I just turned 36. So 36 years of my life.
Yeah.
I kind of relate to Aaron in the sense that over the last 5 and 6 months, just taking action and not knowing what the end result is going to be, but trusting that everything's going to work out. This year alone, I've started 2 businesses. I have an online apparel store and coaching. And none of us expected the pandemic to happen, but then once it did, I was kind of in speaker, conference, traveling mode, and the virus has shut all of that down. And in that time, I could have said, well, that's that, it's not going to happen. Maybe next year. But I actually had the other mindset where I said to myself, no, this is still a great opportunity to build and grow something amazing. And although there are extreme circumstances outside of our control, there's still so much that's in my control. And that's sort of the balance for me, or how I've begun to look at it, where I may go to that worst case scenario and say, well, what if X doesn't work out? Or what if these people don't come through? Or what if I don't do this? But then on the other side, there's no, but what if you succeed? And what if they do come through and everything works out and everybody's fine? And I've been learning to lean toward that side more.
Yeah. So to have faith in the what ifs on the best case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Steve? Vice to virtue, doubt to faith. What's that look like?
For me, I can again relate a little bit to what Aaron had to say. It was coming to terms that really I'm not in control, and I have very little control over what happens, in my immediate surrounding and in the world, for that matter. I'm a passenger on this plane that we call life. So, coming to terms with that, had its own challenges, but having that mindset that I'm not really in control, gives a sense of ease also, that I don't need to be completely wound up. Things will work itself out. I don't need to figure this out at the very moment, and it helps provide a little sense of trust and ease that we'll get through whatever it is that we're going through. So having that faith and trusting that whatever is meant to be is meant to be. It's going to happen. I can only try my best, and the rest of what happens is going to happen on its own.
Yeah, I'm sensing when you talk about faith, there's like a sense of like surrendering almost, like faith, like surrender to the higher power, surrender to the universe, and what that reminds me of is six sits in the thinking center, right? So there's 3 centers of expression in the Enneagram. There's action center, feeling center, and thinking center. So types 8, 9, and 1 sit in action center, and they have like a relationship with anger, like a struggle with anger. Types 2, 3, and 4 sit in the feeling center, and they have a relationship with sadness, shame, and self-worth. And 5, 6, and 7 sit in the thinking center, and they have a relationship with fear. And how the 6 energy shows up in the thinking center is, like Aaron was saying earlier, this kind of like a confused, contradictory energy, right? So let me share what that means. The 5's thinking energy is inward, right? Because a 5 is very much, they sit by themselves alone in a room and think all day long to themselves. So it's very inward energy. A 7's thinking energy is outward. They're optimistic. They think about possibilities. They talk about all the things in the future they're going to do. A 6's thinking energy is a little bit of that confusion where it's like, do I do it or don't I? Do I trust this person or do I not? Am I afraid or am I not? So it's almost like being a prisoner of your mind, right? Being a prisoner of your mind. So the surrendering I'm talking about is the liberation of faith. Faith liberates you to free yourself of your own mind trappings to then use your lines of development, which I want to talk to. So lines of development are leaning into another type of the Enneagram that will also set you free. So the lines of development for the 6 is to 9 and 3. So the 9 is the adaptive peacemaker, and the 3 is the competitive achiever. But even within those lines, there's a release line and a stretch line. So what does that mean? So a release line is a place to go to when you have like a lot of high strain or stress and you're just like totally wound up, and then you can release. And then when you're actually at a pretty good place where you're feeling, pretty calm and confident and balanced, then you can stretch, which will grow you even more and step you more out of your comfort zone. So for a 6, when there's a lot of strain, a lot of maybe doubt or even more paranoia than usual, you release to a 9, which is the peacemaker, which is truly learn to go with the flow, truly learn to relax. And like we're talking about, truly have faith to just surrender to the universe, surrender to whatever the higher power means to you. And then when you surrender and release to that 9 to really just go with the flow, relax, just whatever happens, happens, then you can actually restore equilibrium as a 6. And then it may be time to be like, all right, it's time to step it up, and you go to your 3. The 3, which is time to take action, time to focus on results, time to go be a go-getter. So how does that land with you, that like in terms of really high stress and strain, release to the 9, chill, go with the flow. And when you're at a point where you feel things are, calm, you can then really step it up to the 3. How's that land with you guys? We're all thinking.
Yes. I mean, that's kind of what I've been working on going towards, and getting lots of good feedback around being more in that flow. And I know when I'm at my best, I'm a massive action taker. So like I don't have anything like insightful to say other than like that it's dead on.
Yeah.
My mind just went back to a time in college. One of my coaches has said that his fear for me wasn't that, I wouldn't do the workouts or do the training. His fear for me was that I would burn out and that I would do too much. So for me, learning to rest and relax has been something that I've learned to lean into. And there are certain areas in my life where I think I've done too much resting and relaxing.
Yeah.
And need to learn to flip the switch on it and get back in gear. So for me, it's kind of finding that, like you said, that balance there between either one or the other.
Absolutely. It's actually, you want to be the best of the 9 and the best of the 3, right? And you're right. Like the risk of burnout is because you may be over 3ing without first taking a stop at the 9, right? Because that's why the 9 is your release. Where if you're going to the 3, which is achievement, results, take so much action, if you're in a place that you're already so full, you will burn out. Right. So then sometimes, that the 6 needs to slow down and be more discerning of what actions to take rather than just do everything, So that's where the 9 comes in. That allows you to release some of that 6 energy.
Yeah, I also tend towards burnout, Daniel. And what I've come to just sort of think about in the last few minutes is I think a lot of my 3 energy was creating safety, right? So achievement created the titles, created the financial security, created all the conditions for my safety, and were absolutely not what I needed. And so it's an interesting thing to lean into the fear, because the release of going with the flow is like, that's scary as fuck. Right? So like that's landing a lot around like my tendency to burn out and take massive action, and good reminder to slow down and be discerning.
And also a great distinction that Enneagram is about motivation, not behavior, right? Because 6s, when they lean into their 3, they do take a lot of action. They get so much done, but it's motivated by fear of safety, motivated by, well, I want to belong, so I'm going to do all this stuff, right? Because the motivation is still wanting to belong and wanting to be safe. Whereas the motivation of a 3 is to outshine other people and to be the best. And that's not where the 6 is coming from, even though their behavior may seem that way. What about you, Steve? Talking about those lines of 9, which is, harmony, balance, peace, going with the flow, and 3, which is achievement, results, and goals.
Often been a challenge for me, very much like what Daniel said. It's either one or the other. But to find a good balance has just been challenged. I know for a while there, I was, pedal to the metal, just grinding out, 7 days a week, worked in every day that ended in a Y, and double digits. And it just, the burnout was just inevitable. And then there's other times where I've just, taken off a considerable amount of time, and that doesn't work very well either. So even on a daily basis, I try to kind of balance what needs to really get done, what can wait, and where do I find self-care in between pauses.
And in terms of when you were working like 7 days a week and working really hard, where does the fear come in though? What was where do you think the fear came in, or the wanting to be safe or belong in terms of overworking?
I think I was at the forefront. I thought, there's either something that needed to get done. It was critical, it was important, and it was for the team's sake. Didn't want to let the team down. But maybe I shouldn't probably get ahead of myself. But what's interesting for me is, in retrospect, looking back on it, and thanks to being more aware with your help, it actually was counterproductive for the team, because I finally realized that the team looks at this, I call it the marathon, and they say, I can't keep up with, him. And everybody's situations are different in their home life. So it actually kills morale in many ways, and creates more. Yeah. So that was interesting.
Well, what a great example of, in terms of a social six and instilling trust in the team, right? Because I know, Steve, as your role, you wanting to take a step back from the organization and trusting your team more. But if you're always there, it presents an image that you don't trust them, right? So like there's that, that thing where that counterproductive truth is like, well, I trust my team, but at the same time, like I want to do a lot, and then so that's where it's kind of counterproductive. But it's like, well, if you're always there, how they might not feel as trusted as you trust, as you do trust them. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Cool. Well, one thing I wanted to touch upon also is the wings. So the wings are the two types on either side of you that are part of who you are. And for a six, it's interesting because both of your wings are also in the thinking center. So there's lots of thinking, there's lots of thinking going on in the six. So the wings for you, it's the 7 and the 5. Right, so the 5 is the quiet specialist and the 7 is the enthusiastic visionary, which once again explains the confused energy of the 6. Because on the 5 side, there's quiet thinking time, very facts and knowledge and analysis and introspection. The 7 though is wanting to experience it all and having lots of fun visionary ideas. So then in the middle is the 6, where it's like you're getting kind of pulled at both sides on different ways of thinking, right? It's like quiet reflection versus I have so many fun ideas. But what we want to do is scoop up the best of both, right? Scoop up the best of the 5, which is, have the knowledge to back it up, have the logic, and also scoop up the best of the 7, which is being more positive, having more spontaneity, and more fun and lightheartedness. So what lands for you in terms of scooping up the best of 5, the analytical thinker, and the 7, which is the enthusiastic visionary?
I was definitely closer to the 5 most of my life because I'm a scientist. I'm experimental. I used to literally play with data for a living. Yeah. But I've noticed now that I'm an entrepreneur that I have a lot more of the 7 coming out of me. And it's not just the having lots of ideas, but that sort of like restlessness and FOMO. So what came to me just now is, oh, I wonder if I could like swing back a little bit towards the 5 again, because I seem to have rotated one way in the last couple of years. It would be good to scoop up the other a little bit more.
You need 2 wings to fly. And they both you need 2 wings to fly, and both wings need to be balanced, or you're flying around in a circle. So that's a great insight, is that you were used to heavily rely on the 5 wing more, so you were flying in that circle. Now you're relying on the 7 wing more, so you're flying in that circle. So wow, so let's balance the 5 and the 7 wing.
Yeah. And I love the word and.
Yes, and you can be a 6 and have a 5 wing and a 7 wing. Yeah. What about you, Daniel? What about the wings jumped out at you?
Yeah, similar to Aaron, I've been very analytical my entire life. Like growing up, I was a super big science head. In college, I was an exercise science major. So facts, figures, and facts that we can, physically manipulate always been my thing. And at the same time, there's always been this artistic, creative side of me that's always needed to express itself, whether it's through art and drawing, or more recently, like creative voice work and things like that. So I'm learning to sit more in the peace and calm of silence, and allowing, the factual side of me to kind of subside, and the side that wants to actively be thinking, and just let the creative ideas and, those joyful ideas kind of bubble up. And then once I have them, I see how I can play with them and manipulate them and do different things like that.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'll have to look back at your report. You might have a secondary type of a 4, because I know you've tested as a 4 before, because you mentioned art and creativity. So that's obviously a part of you. So the 4 might be in there too. Yeah.
Definitely.
What about you, Steve, in terms of the wings of the 5 and the 7?
Yeah, I know you and I have discussed that in the past. The analytical, the thinking brain part of me, I can definitely have on my radar and work with. And the 7, the 7 is one that I've very much like Daniel, try to find. I don't know if the word. I like what you used about the airplane and the wings and flying in circles, because I don't have so much of the 7 at my forefront really. It's something that I just would like to continue to work towards.
What would that look like?
What would that look like? I think first being open, honest, transparent, keeping it at my forefront, because unless I'm truly aware of it, I don't think I can work on it, and continue to be vulnerable, and not everything needs to be thought out, and finding some the peace in the downtime, I think, might help. But I guess this is where I kind of rely on you, or you folks on the panel. Is like, where would the 7? What are some things, some outlets or areas where a 7 can maybe find some good meaning, or being able to work towards that balance?
Yeah, good question. What do you think, Danielle and Aaron? Because the 7 in some ways is like the polar opposite of the 6, right? So how do you all find that balance or incorporate it into your life?
It's pretty intentional for me. Intentionally asking myself questions about curiosity and fun and creativity and play. And yeah, that's a big one. And like intentionally kind of building that creative muscle back up, whether it's playing a guitar or writing morning pages, which is a sort of stream of consciousness stuff. It's actively, intentionally putting that in my life and getting curious about where I can find it.
The more I find that I just be myself, that's where I find the most peace, and that the most balance, I guess, in that regard, between like my active thinking and the I'm losing my thought here. That's the foundation of it, though. Just resting in who I am, because naturally I'm very high energy, very jokey, very playful, not too serious. I've had to learn to adopt more of that in life, but the more I just kind of let go and relax and be myself, is, I guess, now where I would find most balance.
What I'm hearing is actually getting out of your head, right? Because remember, the 6 sits in the thinking center. It's a very heady space. So to get into spontaneity, to just take action, and tapping into your feelings, feeling center, talking about your feelings with honesty and vulnerability, like Steve said, but also getting into your body, right? Which can be the body type, like jumping up and down, dancing, whatever. It's like kind of remember you have a body, because you're always in your head a lot. So getting into your body helps. Doing things intentionally out of your comfort zone is definitely help. And then the fun and spontaneity too, like Steve was saying, not everything needs to be thought out. Some things can be like, okay, well, let's just see what happens. Let's just go with the flow. Because that's where faith really comes in, right? Because faith is believing in something that you cannot see or touch. Faith is more of like a feeling of just like, well, I'm just going to have faith, right? And I think that will be very helpful too. Well, wonderful. I mean, as we wrap this up, I just want to highlight, one last time about the subtypes of I'm just interested. So with Aaron as a self-preservation and Daniel as a one-to-one and Steve as a social, how have you all seen the subtle differences even within the three of you? Because I mean, I see it, but I'm wondering if you all see it, that there's subtle differences in even how you all six in the world is a little bit different. What jumps out at you, Aaron? I see you nod your head.
Well, what difference with Steve really popped out of like building safety for others, building trust for others. That's definitely not how my world works. So there was something that like, I can't remember exactly how you put it, Steve, but it's like you, and actually even Daniel, caring about the safety of others and running towards fear in service of that. I do care about that, but me first.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, I love that.
I can totally see it now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you two, Daniel, Steve?
Well, as I've listened to the conversation, it's like, yeah, we all, there are things that, we sort of resonate with each other, but then there are other things I'm just like, do I really belong here?
Skeptic.
Exactly.
Well, and it's the counter type, and you're a skeptic, so it's like a double whammy of of overthinking
Right.
it. Yeah. Yeah. But I think with Daniel, even the idea, well, the one-to-one type, the idea of I got to protect you, right? Because that's the one-to-one is I'm going to protect you. So then thinking about that loyalty and belonging and safety of certain people, and particularly in law enforcement, you are literally protecting certain people. You're literally keeping up certain people safe. Yeah. What about you, Steve? Anything jump out on how the nuances of the subtypes of the six?
Yeah, it's funny with Aaron, I caught a little bit of the putting Aaron first, which is something that I would like to kind of incorporate in my life a little bit. And not in a selfish way, but a more self-aware and self-care aspect. And I also see Daniel's just a slight variation of essentially like the running into danger and how he opened up the conversation, that resonated with me also.
Yeah. Cool. And thanks, Steve, for saying it's not about being selfish. I mean, all the instincts are in us, and they're actually instincts for human survival. So the three instincts of looking out for oneself, we need to do that to survive. And one-to-one actually stems from the instinct of mating, right? You need to have an instinct to connect with others to prolong your species. And then, of course, the third instinct of looking out for the group. So it's not that one is better than the other. There are all instincts in us. It's just that we all have a more dominant instinct, right? But you're right. It's not about being selfish. It's really about self-care and survival as a human species. We need to look out for ourselves. We need to find someone to connect to, and we also need to look out for the group. It's just that all the three of you each have a different dominant instinct. So. Wonderful. Well, this has been fascinating. I think it's like, for me as an Enneagram, expert, to see the three subtypes in front of me is fascinating because I see it so distinctly. So as we wrap this up, what is the final words each of you would like to say that you would love the world to know about being a 6? Like maybe what do you love about being a 6, or what do you want the world to know about what it's like to be a 6, or what's your message for the world about what it really means to be a 6? What do you want them to know?
We're not bad people. Just because we run towards fear, or we have we might be leading with maybe what appears to be skeptical. It's rarely about you. It's more about maybe some of our own opportunities for us to grow. So just be a little patient. But it's like anything else, like a rubber band. We're trying to find some flexibility in an area to work, and it has its ups and downs like anything else. So we're not perfect. We're just human.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
I will say I am so goddamn proud to be a 6. The more I read about the superpowers of the 6, the more I get really excited, because the 6 is a courageous mofo. And if you want to learn how to have courage, follow a 6. And the 6 will look out for you, whether it's them looking out for themselves, looking out for the group. They will lead the movements that will change the world. And that's what I keep learning. And I keep reminding myself when I get down about being a fearful mofo 6. I'm like, no, there's some really amazing things about being a 6. And I know a lot of people get real upset when they get their type. And I hope everyone who gets their type can look at the amazing superpowers that they bring to the table based on their type.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. Daniel?
There was a group of philosophers once, I think collectively they were known as Journey, and they said, don't stop believing.
I think, yeah, with
I don't
those
know.
words.
I'm skeptical because they talk about South Detroit, and there ain't no South Detroit. That's Canada.
Yes, we can learn a lot from Journey in terms of having faith and to not stop believing. But on that point, I think, and like Aaron was saying, when you are the best of your type, we're all amazing leaders. And 6s are absolutely right. 6s are courageous at their best, and they're loyal at their best. So so 6s are great leaders. So if you're going to walk into battle, it's like to have a 6 at the forefront who is strong and courageous and who's got your back is like a winning combination. Well, thank all of you so much. I really appreciate you being here with us today. And I love seeing, more sides of the 6, because oftentimes, like you said, the world may just see like, oh, a 6 is thinking about worst case scenario, but no, it's a lot more than that. There's a loyalty, and there's the courage, and there's the being prepared. It's because you care and you want to be prepared for the worst, to be able to take care of others, to be able to take care of yourself. It's coming from such a great place. So thank you so much, and thank you, viewers, for watching. If you want to find out more, please visit my website, haydenlee.com, HAYDNLEE.com. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel to see other Enneagram panels. So thank you, 6s. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and go out there and be courageous and be strong and be loyal to others, and also loyal to yourself. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
You.
Have a wonderful day.